Welcome to the Deep Dive, listeners. Today, we're trying something a little different. We're going to act as philosophers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we're going to take a philosopher and try to get in their head and understand how they saw the world and what that led them to do. And for this deep dive, it's going to be Giordano Bruno. He lived, let me see, from 1548 to 1600, so right in the heart of the Renaissance. And he was a real radical thinker. He just did not take anything at face value, especially anything Aristotle said. Yeah, Bruno was like super influenced by Copernicus and that whole shift away from a Earth-centered universe.
Yeah.
He got himself in a lot of trouble for his views. Bruno was officially excommunicated from, get this, the Roman Catholic Church, the Calvinist Church, and the Lutheran Church.
Wow.
Yeah, he was kind of a moving target, too. Bruno traveled all over Europe teaching and writing and debating. And in the end, he was actually executed for his beliefs.
So for this deep dive, we're going to try to figure out what exactly those beliefs were and how he kind of put them all together into a coherent system. We're mainly going to be using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on Bruno.
Right. So we'll look at his cosmology, how he saw the universe, and also his metaphysics, like his views on the ultimate nature of reality, and of course his understanding of God and God's relationship to the universe.
Right.
Let's start with his issues with Aristotle. It seems like Bruno just rejected the whole Aristotelian way of thinking about the natural world.
He did. Bruno directly attacked Aristotelian natural philosophy. He thought the whole thing was just wrong. Like, he really went after Aristotle's view of the universe, as finite and with the Earth at the center. And when Copernicus came along and said, no, the Earth revolves around the sun, that was huge for Bruno. It totally blew apart Aristotle's physics. Like, the idea that all the elements had their fixed places and that everything beyond the moon was perfect and unchanging.
So Bruno was on board with this heliocentric view, but it seems like he took it even further than Copernicus did.
Yeah, he did. I mean, Bruno just totally embraced the idea of an infinite universe. And not just infinite in size, but also, filled with life and activity. Bruno saw the universe as this huge, eternal, living thing. And the cool part is he was convinced that he arrived at these conclusions purely through reason, like through the power of his own mind.
That's a pretty big claim,
Yeah.
It's a pretty bold statement about the power of human reason. But an infinite universe filled with life, that's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Definitely.
And it wasn't just the universe, right? He had some other pretty out there ideas as well.
Oh, yeah?
That were pretty far from the mainstream thinking of his time.
Oh, for sure. Like, take metempsychosis, for example. That's the idea that the soul transmigrates from one body to another after death.
Right. Reincarnation.
Exactly. He also believed in polygenism, which is the idea that different groups of humans might have evolved separately. And then there's his idea of panpsychism. Panpsychism is this view that mind or consciousness is actually fundamental to all reality, not just living things. So rocks and stars, everything would have some level of mind or soul.
Right. And those ideas, I mean, they really go against the grain of traditional Christianity, with its emphasis on human imperfection and original sin.
Yeah, they do. Bruno was all about humans perfecting themselves, through the power of their minds. He really believed in that.
So it's like he's saying, hey, don't just sit there and accept what you're told. Get out there, explore, use your mind, question everything.
That's a great way to put it. He saw that as the key to self-improvement, and this whole emphasis on self-improvement through knowledge ties in with his idea of ancient wisdom.
Right, his idea of the Gentile tradition of the wisdom, whatever that is.
Right. So this is kind of a complicated thing, but it's super important to Bruno. Basically, he believed that there was this ancient tradition of wisdom that was older and purer than even Greek philosophy. And he traced this tradition back to figures like Zoroaster, who was a Persian prophet, and Hermes Trismegistus, who was this kind of legendary figure associated with alchemy and magic.
So he's saying that Plato and Aristotle, they were just like knockoffs, like they were just copying this older tradition.
Well, not exactly copying, but he did think that they had kind of watered down this original wisdom. He saw Greek philosophy as this kind of debased version of what came before. And his goal was to restore this authentic ancient philosophy by piecing together clues from whatever surviving Egyptian writings he could find and, stuff from the Pythagoreans, and even looking for glimmers of truth in the Greek philosophers.
So, like, he even used Aristotle sometimes, even though he thought Aristotle was kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
He's like cherry-picking the good stuff.
Exactly. Bruno was very selective, and he wasn't afraid to criticize people he disagreed with. He even had some harsh words for the scholastics of his own time, like the university professors who were all about, their fancy Latin rhetoric and their complicated arguments. He thought they were missing the point.
Right. It's like they were more interested in showing off their cleverness than actually uh, seeking truth.
Right, exactly.
So, Bruno was pretty critical of Christianity, too.
He was. Bruno had a really unique interpretation of Scripture. He basically flipped the traditional view on its head.
How so?
Well, he argued that the Bible was actually drawing on this older Egyptian wisdom that he was so fascinated by. He would point to the story of Moses. You know how Moses was raised in the Pharaoh's court and learned all the wisdom of the Egyptians. And Bruno basically equated that Egyptian wisdom with the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. So in his mind, the Old Testament was actually kind of a tributary of this pre-Mosaic wisdom tradition.
So for Bruno, the real source of truth wasn't the Bible. It was this ancient Egyptian tradition.
Exactly. It's a pretty radical idea, right?
Yeah, I can only imagine how that went over with the church authorities.
Well, I'm guessing he actually referred to scripture as the Kabbalah a lot, which is kind of interesting. It's like he was using that term as this kind of veiled reference to this broader ancient wisdom tradition.
Okay, so that's his approach to ancient wisdom and religion.
Right.
Let's talk about his cosmology, his
Yeah.
actual view of the universe.
Yeah.
So we've already talked about how he embraced the heliocentric view, the idea that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Right. But Bruno went way beyond just accepting the basic idea. He saw the heliocentric model as this key that unlocked a whole new understanding of the cosmos.
In what way?
Well, he reasoned that if there was no fixed outer sphere to the universe, like the Aristotelian model assumed, then there was really no reason to believe that the universe was finite at all. And that's how he arrived at his idea of an infinite universe.
Right. And he didn't see the stars and planets as just these dead rocks floating around in space.
No, not at all. He believed they were all alive and intelligent. They moved effortlessly in this infinite expanse, which was filled with ether. Ether is like this subtle substance, kind of like air, but even more refined. And Bruno thought that each star and each planet had its own soul, which was responsible for its motion. He even cited the book of Job, that part in the Bible where God talks about laying the foundations of the earth, to support this idea.
So for Bruno, the universe is not just it's not just infinite in size, it's also teeming with life and intelligence, right?
Right. And he even speculated about other kinds of beings, like demons, that inhabited this vast cosmos. He thought demons had these rarefied bodies made of ether and other subtle elements, and that they often possess greater intelligence than humans. And he thought they were everywhere, not just in some supernatural realm.
So a universe full of stars, planets, and demons.
And don't forget all the other forms of life that might exist out there. Bruno believed in the spontaneous generation of life, the idea that living things can just arise from non-living matter. So he imagined all sorts of strange and wonderful creatures inhabiting the countless worlds scattered throughout this infinite universe.
Wow. Okay. So what about his view of matter? How did he understand what the universe is actually made of?
Well, Bruno's theory of elements was pretty different from the traditional Aristotelian view. Like with a lot of his ideas, he took inspiration from the ancient Greeks, especially the Pythagoreans, who were all about numbers and harmony, and the atomists, who believed that everything was made of tiny, indivisible particles. But he put his own spin on these ideas.
How so?
Well, he proposed that everything was made of 4 principles. 2 of these principles were material, earth and water, and the other 2 were immaterial, spirit and soul.
Okay. And what did those terms mean for him? They sound kind of abstract.
They are. By Earth, he meant these tiny indivisible spheres, which he sometimes called atoms, but they weren't like the atoms we know about today. They were more like dimensionless points. They didn't have any real size or shape. And water for him was a continuous substance, kind of like the opposite of Earth. It was the principle of extension. It gave things their size and shape in space.
Okay, so earth and water make up the material world. And what about spirit and soul? What are they doing?
Soul was the principle of motion. Bruno thought that everything that moves is moved by its own soul, and spirit was this kind of connecting principle. It was what allowed the soul to interact with the body. So you could think of the body as being made of earth and water, and the soul as being the thing that animates it and gives it life, and the spirit is what kind of bridges the gap between the soul and the body.
Okay, so not exactly like the traditional four elements of earth, air, fire, and water.
No, not at all. Bruno's system was much more sophisticated, and I mean, he drew on some really ancient ideas, but also tried to incorporate newer thinking about the universe.
Got it.
This system really challenged both Aristotle's finite, divisible universe and the more mechanistic views of the ancient atomists.
Okay, so we've talked about the elements, but we also have to talk about the universal soul, the universal matter, and the universal intellect.
Yeah.
These are pretty important concepts for Bruno, right?
They're absolutely central to his philosophy. He saw the entire universe as this single living organism, and the animating principle of this organism was the universal soul. This soul was present in everything, from the largest stars down to the smallest grains of sand, and it was responsible for the life and motion of the entire cosmos. And he even went so far as to identify the universal soul with the Holy Spirit in Christianity. That was a pretty bold move. And then there's universal matter. Bruno saw universal matter as this kind of this formless, indeterminate space, this potential that was just waiting to be shaped and formed, and the force that did the shaping was the universal intellect.
So universal matter is kind of like the clay, and the universal intellect is the potter.
That's a good analogy. The universal intellect contained all the ideas, all the perfect forms, and it acted as this kind of cosmic craftsman that shaped and molded universal matter into the world we see.
So wait, just to clarify, the universal matter is the stuff that things are made of. The universal soul is what gives them life, and the universal intellect is what gives them their specific form.
You got it. That's a great way to summarize it.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm following so far. But what about God? Where does God fit into all of this?
Well, for Bruno, God wasn't this separate being who created the universe and then just kind of sat back and watched it unfold. He was much more of a pantheist, someone who believes that God and the universe are one and the same. He saw the universe as this infinite, eternal, and perfect expression of the divine.
So he's basically saying that the universe is God.
Well, it's a little more nuanced than that. Bruner adopted what's called a monistic view. Monism is the idea that all of reality is ultimately one thing. And he drew on the ancient Greek philosophers, the Eleatics, especially Parmenides, who said that true being was this one unchanging and indivisible thing. And Bruno took that idea and applied it to the universe.
Okay, so the universe is this one unchanging thing, and that one thing is God.
Right. But Bruno also recognized that the universe, as we experience it, is full of change and diversity. And he explained that by saying that God is beyond being, beyond all the categories and distinctions that we use to understand the world. But the universe, as this infinite expression of God, is the one being that encompasses all of those changes and differences.
So God is like the ultimate reality, and the universe is this kind of this reflection or image of that ultimate reality.
Exactly. He called the universe the second God, the infinite likeness of the divine. It's like a mirror that reflects God's perfection, but it's not God itself.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
No.
But how does he explain the idea of creation? If God and the universe are one, then how did the universe come to be?
Well, Bruno argued that the universe didn't really come to be in the sense that we usually think of it. He believed that it has always existed. And he used the concepts of act and potency, drawing on Nicholas of Cusa, a 15th century philosopher.
Act and potency.
Yeah, so act is what something actually is, and potency is what it has the potential to be. And for Bruno, God's act and potency are one and the same. God is pure actuality, pure being. And because God is infinite, his potency is also infinite. So God's infinite power to create must result in an infinite creation.
So the universe is infinite because God is infinite, and God's infinite power couldn't have created anything less.
Exactly. Bruno saw any separation between God's absolute power and his ordained power as totally illogical. For him, an all-powerful God couldn't just choose to create a finite universe.
Yeah.
The infinite universe is the only creation that's truly worthy of God's infinite power.
That's a pretty powerful argument.
Yeah.
But how does he reconcile the idea of God as this transcendent being, beyond the universe, with the idea that God is also present within the universe?
Right. Well, Bruno describes God's intrinsic nature, what God is in himself, as mind, intellect, and love. And then he talks about God's extrinsic manifestation, how God appears in the world as the being of the universe, universal intellect, and universal soul.
Okay. And how does that work? I mean, how can God be both beyond the universe and within it at the same time?
He used the analogy of the sun.
Oh, okay.
Like the sun has its own inherent light and heat, right? But it also radiates that light and heat outward, illuminating and warming everything around it. So God is like the sun in that he has his own inner being, but he also expresses himself outwardly in the form of the universe.
Right. But the sun is a physical object and God isn't, right?
That's true. And Bruno acknowledges that any analogy to a finite thing is going to be limited when you're trying to describe the infinite,
Right.
but it still gives us some idea of how he saw God as being both transcendent and immanent.
So God is present within the universe, even though he's also beyond it.
Right. And Bruno believed that individual things actually participate in God's being, life, and intellect. And that's where his famous saying comes in. Nature is God in things. He traced this idea all the way back to ancient Egypt, to the Hermetic texts.
Okay, so God is somehow present in everything.
Exactly. And that leads us to his idea of panpsychism, which we talked about earlier.
Right, the idea that mind is everywhere.
Right. Because God's intellect, which is the source of all knowledge and understanding, is present throughout the universe. Bruno concluded that everything must have some level of mind or consciousness.
Even rocks and trees.
Even rocks and trees.
Wow.
He had this whole theory of knowledge where God is the ultimate source of what he called intelligible light. And this light allows intellects at all levels, from God down to, the simplest creatures, to understand things. And he believed that animals were definitely intelligent. They have their own way of understanding the world. Their instincts, he argued, were just forms of intelligence that we don't fully grasp.
Interesting. So it's like everything has its own way of knowing, its own way of being intelligent.
Exactly. And Bruno even went so far as to say that even inanimate matter, like rocks and stuff, has this kind of basic cognitive capacity, this appetite for form.
Okay, so everything has some level of mind or soul. But what about us humans? What's our place in all of this?
Well, Bruno saw the universe as being fundamentally perfect, with all of its parts working together in harmony. And he believed that individual humans were kind of like temporary expressions of this one underlying being, this one being that is the universe. He thought that our individual souls would eventually reunite with the universal soul after death.
So like we're all just little drops of water that eventually flow back into the ocean.
That's a good way to put it. But he also believed in the immortality of the soul. Like, he thought that the soul couldn't be destroyed. So he adopted the idea of metempsychosis, which is the idea that the soul is reborn into a new body after death. But he had a very specific interpretation of this. He believed that the soul was immediately reborn into a new body that was determined by divine providence, by God's plan. So the kind of life you lived in this life would determine the kind of body you got in the next life. It was a way of ensuring a kind of cosmic justice.
Oh, interesting. So it's not like you have to wait around for karma to catch up with you. It's like instant karma.
Exactly. And he believed that the path to self-perfection, to becoming a better person, was through contemplating the one being, through moving from just experiencing the world through our senses to actually understanding the underlying principles, the ideas that govern it all.
So like from just seeing to really understanding.
Exactly. And he thought that the ultimate goal was to achieve this kind of this intellectual union with the universal intellect, a state where you lose your individual identity and kind of merge with the cosmic mind.
Wow. That sounds intense.
Yeah, that's a pretty lofty goal.
But Bruno also had a lot to say about religion, and it's pretty clear that he wasn't a big fan of traditional Christianity.
He definitely wasn't. He thought that his philosophy was the real path to enlightenment and salvation. He was very critical of Christian doctrines and practices. He didn't like the emphasis on faith over reason, and he thought the whole idea of original sin was bogus, that humans were inherently good, not born sinners.
Okay, and what about the clergy? He didn't seem to have a very high opinion of them.
Not really. Bruno thought that they were more interested in power and control than in genuine spirituality. He admired the ancient Romans, their emphasis on worldly achievement and glory, and he contrasted that with the Christian idea of renouncing the world and focusing on the afterlife.
Right.
But he did acknowledge that religion could be useful for the masses, for people who weren't capable of grasping the deeper truths of philosophy.
So like religion is a kind of a necessary evil.
Kind of, yeah. He thought it could provide moral guidance and social order, keep people from doing bad things. And he acknowledged that the Bible contains some philosophical truths, but he thought those truths ultimately came from the ancient Egyptians.
So it's like he's saying, okay, religion has its uses, but don't take it too seriously. The real truth is in philosophy.
Right. He was totally against miracles. He didn't believe that God would ever violate the laws of nature. So he explained away all the miracles in the Bible as either natural events that were misinterpreted or even the work of demons.
Oh, wow. Okay, so for Bruno, true morality comes from understanding the natural world, not from following religious dogma.
Exactly. He thought that philosophers, the true heroes, didn't need the threat of hell or the promise of heaven to be good. They understood the inherent order of the universe, and they lived their lives accordingly. He called Christianity a foolish faith and a wretched story.
So basically, he thought Christianity was a step backward from the wisdom of the ancients.
Exactly.
Okay, so to wrap up, it seems like Bruno was a real revolutionary thinker. His ideas challenged pretty much every aspect of the established worldview of his time.
He definitely was. His whole system, with its infinite universe, its immanent God, and its focus on human reason, it was totally different from the prevailing Aristotelian and Christian worldviews.
Ah,
And it's amazing to think that he developed all of these ideas in a time when the church had so much power and people were often persecuted for even questioning the accepted doctrines.
right. He was definitely risking his life by speaking out the way he did. I mean, and unfortunately, he did end up paying the ultimate price for his beliefs.
He did, but his ideas have continued to inspire people for centuries.
Right.
Like Spinoza, who was a 17th century philosopher who developed his own system of pantheism, was definitely influenced by Bruno.
Right. And there's a whole revival of interest in Bruno's work in the 19th century, when
Hmm.
people were really starting to question traditional religion and authority. So his legacy has lived on. So, listener, as you think about all these ideas that we've just discussed, I want you to consider this. How does Bruno's vision of an infinite universe where nature is God in things
Hmm.
resonate with or challenge your own understanding of the world? And what aspects of his way of acting as a philosopher, his courage, his intellectual honesty, his willingness to synthesize ideas from all sorts of different sources are most relevant for us today? Those are some questions to ponder.
They are. And on that note, we conclude our deep dive into the fascinating and challenging world of Giordano Bruno. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for listening.